Okay, I'll go ahead and begin. So welcome everyone. This is the August 10th, 2022 Delivery Group's monthly AMA. So Delivery Group is responsible for deployments and releases to all GitLab users. So I will kick off. We have one question on the agenda. Alpa's not on the call, so I'll verbalize. Could post-deployment migrations be run during the Canary window after Canary has been deployed, but before production deploy? This is related to a change that Alpa is currently working on. So I've added my answer here, but Skarbek, if you want to add any additional details, please do jump in. So sort of short answer is no. We have things set up so the post-deploy migrations pipeline won't be executing any migrations before they've been deployed to production, and added in a note there.
Your answer is correct. And, I guess maybe to add on top of that, we do have a policy inside of the GitLab repository that requires changes to be backward compatible to a certain number of revisions. That in itself should be helpful in certain use cases where we might have a problem deploying for a couple of days, for example, and we haven't had a chance to run the post-deploy migration pipeline. That should provide us with a certain level of safety to prevent awkward things from happening between the expected database schema and the version of the application that is running as well.
That's great call out. Yeah, do you happen to know if you have a link for that, Skarbek? If not, I can try and find one to add after.
I do not.
Okay, I'll see if I can find that.
Just some brain memory.
Awesome. I'll also add on here, this is kind of related to our recent changes to separate out the pipeline. So I'll put the handbook update in there. And what we've essentially done recently is the final stages of the auto deploy pipeline were to execute these post-deploy migrations. And what we've done is pretty much just lifted the jobs related to that into their own independent pipeline. And the goal behind that is it means that all auto deploy packages now have the ability to roll back if we have problems in production. So bit of extra context there in case anyone is on the call but hasn't been following along with those changes. Awesome. Lee, you have the next question.
Yeah, so I'm working a lot with Amazon Web Services and FinServ accounts. So the NASDAQ, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, those kinds of folks. And they distinguish a pretty big difference between what a deployment is and what a release is. And usually there is, I know we've got the capability through the environments of being able to support that you have environment type of scheduling to be able to make sure that somebody approves somebody going between environments. Are we thinking about anything about releases where, let's say I've got multiple different projects that each deploy things independently, where there is the ability to think of having a release that aggregates across multiple projects to have a single final deployment that would be considered a release across all of those projects? I don't know if that made sense.
That's a great question. Yeah, I suppose just one little extra thing then in terms of what you would like to see, like, is that the sort of goal that there is a single package that sort of is the result of all deployments?
So if you think of the way that I talk to them, and this may be wrong in the way that I'm talking about it with our customers, but so I've opened the discussion up, but let's say I've got a subgroup that has 5 microservices that are associated with it. And then there is a 6th project that has other dependencies that are included, that I may have Terraform scripts for configuring a database or some middleware or something else that the project depends on. And there's a change management process that goes across the 5 microservices that, let's say, each creates their own Docker image to deploy into different namespaces. And when I go ahead and deploy, I want to take the I want to make sure that the latest image from microservice 1 through microservice 5, that they all get released in conjunction with one another through some sort of dependency, as well as that 6th project to make sure that any database updates, any additional middleware that may be required also gets released at the same time, with some sort of tracking that shows if something did fail, that the rest of the components would either roll back, or I would have a way to be able to show that there was a failed deployment to do a manual rollback if it was required.
Yeah, that's a great question. Does anyone want to jump in and answer? If not, I can share my thoughts.
I'm not sure if Lee is talking about GitLab.com deployments or just deployments of customer applications.
Customer applications.
Okay. I think that would fall under what the release team is doing rather than what we are doing. Amy, is that right?
Yeah, that's possibly right. So certainly for the sort of the deployments that delivery is running, we are sort of working towards this model. So currently on GitLab.com, we deploy, it's pretty much monolithic. Pretty much everything just is packaged up and released to GitLab.com as one thing. And then what that guarantees us is we're able to then produce the package, which goes off to self-manage, exactly as you're sort of saying, like, you know, we produce a single package that if you install, you get all the pieces that go with that. And what we're actually starting to work towards is to think about whether it's possible for stage groups to deploy to GitLab.com, which doesn't rely on that single package, and have more independence, while still resulting as having a single package that we actually can give to self-manage. We want to make sure you don't have to, you know, install things in certain orders or run pipelines or have dependencies, but it's just a single installation that either works or it doesn't work. So that's kind of how we're operating. I suppose in terms of so customers should still be able to expect that they will have a single package with all the pieces in it. In terms of whether we have sort of features and things coming out, I'm not totally sure. Like that's certainly something we can check in with release.
Yeah, and I could see it being, because as you were describing the idea of that monolithic type deployment model, it's a conversation I know the sales teams struggle with, because a lot of our customers, to build out that type of deployment scenario, they end up creating mono repos. And then those mono repos very quickly end up becoming larger than, 5 gig in size, depending on how many contributors they have, which then leads to a whole other set of issues. So that's where I'm trying to balance those two things together, so we can minimize the number of mono repos to make sure that people are able to collaborate most effectively with Git and with GitLab using merge requests, but at the same time being able to release that single type artifact on the back end.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's such an interesting challenge, because as we're starting to think about it now, it's all down to kind of keeping track of dependencies and keeping track of versions, and knowing, component A has version 10 and component B is 11, and have they been tested together? So it's certainly a really interesting challenge. But yeah, I'm not aware at the moment that we have things in place to allow us to do that. Like, GitLab has been very monolithic, so we've kind of built all of our tools and processes that we're using in delivery, at least, to support that.
Great, thank you.
Great, thanks so much for asking. Has anybody else got a question that they would like to verbalize? No. Final shout before we end the call and give you all back some time. Like, if anyone has any or comments, also happy to receive feedback on how the processes are working for people.
Amy, I've got a question for you.
Go for it.
How's the OKRs looking for the delivery team?
Great question. So we are just early into the quarter. So we have, within delivery, we have got 4 main OKRs that we're focusing on this quarter. So we've just recently split delivery group into 2 teams. One of our teams is the delivery system group, delivery system team. And that team is going to be focusing this quarter on rebuilding all production clusters within a week. So this ties into our disaster recovery work and generally kind of improving our ability to kind of operate our Kubernetes clusters. And also we're currently still scoping, but related to our self-serve work, we are scoping out what would be a useful kind of foundational preparation work that we can do that sets us up well for actually moving some components to having self-serve deployments and maintaining our kind of single release package. Then over on the other side, we have our orchestration team, and that team is focusing this quarter on, we've identified some steps that we will expect all components to move towards in order to reach self-serve. This is based on the things we've learned from GitLab.com deployments over the years. So we sort of know that there are version files we need to manage, and we need to have tests in place and various metrics. So we've identified a couple of components, and we're going to try and move them a couple of steps closer to self-serve deployments. What this means in sort of day-to-day is we have 2 stage groups who will have a slightly easier time getting their changes onto GitLab.com and also included into our monthly releases. So all of those bits sort of tie together and sort of give us a good setup for Q4 on self-serve. And then we have 1 extra OKR that we're working on in the orchestration side, and that is preparing for a backport extension. So in Q4, we expect to start working on supporting patch releases going back further. Something we know a lot of customers want. At the moment, it's not very straightforward. There's a lot of difficulties with getting fixes into older branches. There's a lot of challenges of keeping branches kind of building and deploying them to environments. So we're going to spend some time this quarter working out what exactly will be involved in that. And then in Q4, we expect to start working on actually setting up to support the extension that's coming. So those are the OKRs. All of them are on quite low percentages because we're very early in the quarter. So all of them are at the moment sort of in progress. I think all of them are currently in the sort of setup and investigation stage. So we're doing a lot of work of investigating how the components are currently deploying, how our health checks and metrics currently work. And then from that, we will start planning out the hands-on work to improve things. Great, thanks for asking that, Skarbek. Does anybody else have a question they'd like to verbalize? Okay, in which case, thanks so much for all the questions, and thanks for joining us again this month. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Take care.